There you go. All right. Well, thank you for having me today. Like Jacob said, I'm an attorney with Lommen Abdo. Our headquarters is in the IDS Center in downtown Minneapolis. We've got about 44 attorneys total. Most of them are in that office. We have 5 attorneys in Hudson, Wisconsin office, just along the St. Croix. And then we have 1 attorney in New York, of all places. We have our firm is, one of its niches is entertainment and IP law. So if entertainment practice, the coast become part of our client base. And so we have 1 person out in New York, and if the other in-laws ever get their way, we'll have something in LA as well. But I get to stay mainly here in Wisconsin. I've been practicing for 12 years. I graduated, as Jacob said, I graduated from St. Thomas in 1997. I actually got an engineering degree. I was like the first undergrad class to get an engineering degree. And I think it's one that they don't even have anymore. It's manufacturing engineering. I always say that I got a degree basically by default. They had to graduate somebody out of the engineering program, so they let me through. And then, I got mixed up in politics when I was here. I come from a family of engineers, and my dad sat me down and said, if you're going to mess around with this political stuff, you might want to go to law school. So, interesting thing. You do a thing where maybe doing patent law. Went down the streets in William Mitchell, took a patent law course, hated it. Hooked up the day after my first year ended down there. I started clerking for a firm out in Minnetonka that did business, real estate, and estate planning work, and I loved it. And I've been doing it pretty much ever since in various concentrations as the years go by. But I've basically been doing the same thing for about a dozen years now. Was at one firm for about 4 years after I was admitted. Then I went to another firm for the last 7, and then joined Lommen actually in February of this year. So I'm licensed here in Minnesota, and then I'm also licensed in Wisconsin, which is a little bit different animal, Wisconsin real estate law compared to Minnesota. It's nice now to have a full-time Wisconsin office, so some of these questions when I get on, I'll just pick up the phone and call my husband, guys, see what we can do. And then I'm also certified by the Minnesota State Bar Association has a certification program for various specializations in the law, and one of them is real estate. And I set out a few years ago, I wanted to do this. I wanted to get certified, and it involves taking X number of continuing ed classes and showing that you have enough practice time in various disciplines of real estate, and then getting some references from your peers, from other attorneys. And so I was certified in 2008, and I wanted to do this. It was about 2 or 3 years that I wanted to do this, and so I got ready for it. And then I signed up for it. I'm like, wait a minute, I haven't taken a test since like 2000. It was like 2000. So 8 years I haven't taken a test. That was my full-time gig at the time. What am I going to do? I even had I have an old sweatshirt. It's my Ireland Hall sweatshirt, and it's like got holes all over in the arms and stuff. And I wore it when I took my LSAT, and I wore it when I took the bar exam, so it became my lucky test day. So here I am walking in with this room full of attorneys downtown, and I've got this ratty old Ireland Hall sweatshirt on, but they're like, okay, whatever, but I passed it, so if I ever take another bar exam again, I'll have to take out the Ireland Hall sweatshirt. So, how I ended up as a lawyer, like I said, I started coming as an engineer, and being at St. Thomas was a really good thing for me. Having all the different classes, the different areas I was exposed to, poli-sci, philosophy, theology, and all that. And so it kind of opened. It really is a good base that you're getting here, being at St. Thomas and getting a broad background for whatever you decide to do. Like I said, I'm so far afield from what my major was, or what I graduated with. It's interesting. Some of the things that I've worked on over the years, I came in 2000 was when I was admitted. And so I have been, as the market went up, but I would have been as the market went back down, and now looks like we're starting to see the market start to turn upward again. And I've done what I call upside and downside work. Back in the day, did a lot of land acquisition, did a lot of CIC work. Everybody knows CIC, community condos, townhomes and stuff. I must have done about a half dozen different office condos, townhomes, condominiums. I don't think I'll be using those documents anytime soon. All these projects that were originally slated to be condos when the market crashed, I'm seeing now come back as kind of upscale apartments and things like that. So I don't know if we're going to see the condo market, the condo boom we did before. But did a lot of work in that area. That's been interesting. I carried that on representing some individual homeowners associations and condos associations, which is always interesting when you get neighbors fighting with neighbors and threatening to sue each other and things like that. There's always some interesting issues when it comes to that balance of property rights versus living in a controlled community and having the restrictions on everything to kind of govern the community. It's really interesting to deal with the single family context. I actually live in a homeowners association. I'm on my board, so I get to deal with wonderful blog farm is all I can say. But it's an interesting area. Did a lot of purchases and sales of real estate. Have done a lot, even as the market was down. Been doing a lot of commercial leasing, negotiating leases on both the tenant side, the landlord side, handling defaults and working out a lot of those different issues. As the market started to decline, I worked on it for a couple of small banks on some forbearance and foreclosure transactions. Trying to work out defaulted loans, so that would give me some practice with mechanics, lien litigation, things like that. Now we're seeing again, I'm working with a lot of real estate investors. I'll talk a little bit about some of the niche areas that I work on with investors. Working the last couple weeks has been a lot of leases again. I just closed a commercial deal last week for a little veterinary clinic where we bought kind of a strange deal. We bought the business in March. We had to wait 120 days because the IRS had a federal tax lien. So the previous owner did a voluntary foreclosure, but they had a longer redemption period when you're the IRS compared to the 7 days that a normal creditor gets on a redemption. So we had to wait a little bit, so then we closed that. So that was an interesting transaction. And then just do I'm kind of a jack of all trades when it comes to real estate stuff, and I think that's been helpful. And whether you're going to go and go to law school and become a real estate attorney, or whether you're just going to go into real estate practice, it's good to have kind of a broad experience. And it's good to have niches, but it's also good to keep a nice broad swath of experience, so that when things change, the real estate market's always fluctuating, right? Are we ever going to see as big a boom as we did, a bigger crash? I hope not. But you just always have to be prepared for whatever the market brings and just adapt to the situation. I do have other practice areas. I do a lot of business law, business transactions. One of the fun areas I get to work in is I represent about a dozen microbreweries. Some of the ones that you probably know, Flat Earth and Lift Bridge, and some of these that are out there. There's a real estate piece of that because you've got to have. There's a lot of lease negotiations that go with it. Not every home brewer that's starting out and moving into starting their own brewery has enough money to go buying a building. So you're going to have to find the right space, and you have to negotiate it. You're probably going to have to negotiate a rent-free period because you got at least about 6 months before you get your license from the feds to brew beer and things like that. So it's always it's an interesting area to be in, and it's nice to be able to bring my real estate practice into that. So plus it's nice to go and have client meetings at their establishment at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So that's pretty fun. Like I said, there's a lot of broad different areas that I practice in. One thing that I established about 4 years ago, this kind of little niche area, is in the area of real estate investors buying real estate through their IRA. I don't know how many, show of hands, how many of you guys have heard about this, about buying real estate in your IRA? Okay, 2, okay. Well, here's the deal. You guys can understand, obviously, retirement plans and 401ks and IRAs. And there's a lot of folks out there right now that, with the banks have a lot of money right now, and they're complaining about how overcapitalized they are. But they aren't, because of we got the regulators watching over them, and they're skittish to make a lot of loans. They aren't doing a lot of the lending that they were doing back in the day that investors need to move properties quickly, rehab them, and sell them, right? So investors have to find some alternative to, or it could be someone that was a developer and maybe had to go through a bankruptcy during when the market crashed and is trying to rebuild their real estate holdings and getting back in the game. So they're coming up with some other way of doing it. They're not going to get money from a bank. So they got to think outside the box and going to private investors. That's another alternative. It's expensive. It's complicated. There's so many different businesses right now looking for private equity that it's an investor's market, okay? And so again, it's not always the most attractive funding source for some of the investors that are trying to crack into the market or get back into the market, doing the rehabs and flips and things like that, or getting into rental properties. So they look at their IRA, and most of the time they go to whoever their financial advisor is, and they probably hear, no, we can't do that. And it isn't that legally they can't do it. It's your big financial brokerage firms don't want to be messing around with a portfolio of rental properties and investment properties, right? They're there to do stocks and bonds and mutual funds and things like that. But they could do it. There's a handful of third-party administrators around the country. There's one locally here, and there's a few banks that have trust departments that will do it too, that will allow you to set up an IRA. They call it a self-directed IRA. They set up the account, and you as the IRA owner instruct where the money is to be invested. So if you're a real estate investor, you have some kind of level of sophistication, you want to try your hand at this, you go and you set up an account, and then you come to someone like me, and you can set up an LLC. And the reason you would set up an LLC is it gives you what they call checkbook control over the IRA funds. Okay, so you form an LLC, set up a bank account, you tell your administrator, move X amount of dollars into the bank account, and now you can write checks on the account and buy your properties, hire your maintenance people, hire your contractors, fix them up, hire your property manager, you're going to rent them, you're going to do all that kind of stuff. It is not without pitfalls. And one of the big areas that you have to deal with, especially when you've got basically the checkbook, as the IRA owner holding the checkbook with the funds, you have to worry about what's called self-dealing transactions. The IRS has a whole series of regulations about what you can do with your IRA funds. And there's a lot of prohibited transactions. You can't be doing transactions. You can't do deals. They look at whether or not you're doing some kind of a deal that would be deemed to be a distribution of your IRA funds. Because if you take a distribution before the age of 59 and a half, there's significant tax and interest penalties, and you're going to get hit with those if you do a transaction that the IRS deems to be a distribution. Okay, so things like you can't buy a building through your IRA and lease it to the company that you own 100% of. Okay, and they're saying that your company, you personally, are getting a benefit from your IRA funds. Okay, you can't buy a building through an LLC that's funded by your IRA, and then have your property management company that you own personally manage it and take a fee. Because now you're taking money out. Okay, so things like that. Lineal descendants, children, grandchildren, parents, spouses, companies that you control, trusts that you control, all these different people and entities are called disqualified persons, and to do a transaction involving a disqualified person is prohibited, and they can trigger the tax, interest, and penalty. So a lot of my job is not, I set up a client with the LLC and help get the IRA funds into the LLC. And then I have to ask them, okay, and this is usually the first question I ask when someone comes to me and say, I want to use my IRA to buy real estate, and I'll ask them, or I want to set up an LLC. It usually comes in, I want to use my LLC I want to fund with my IRA. Okay, what do you want to do with it? And there's a handful of them. I would say about 10 to 15% of the time, what they're wanting to do with it would violate the self-dealing rules and would cause a penalty. So that we either have to come up with another way of doing what they want to do, or we just say this is not an option. We think of an alternative. So part of my job, so the business attorney side of me sets up this LLC and helps them get all that kind of stuff. The real estate attorney side of me goes through and actually helps them, work through the transaction, make sure that they're doing it right, and that they're not ending up doing something that's going to violate self-dealing rules. I mean, it is really picky. They don't split hairs over things like you can't. If you're going to do this, you can't sign a purchase agreement in your own name, close it, and then quick claim the property to your LLC. That's considered a self-dealing transaction. Okay. If you buy a property like that, you can't even mow the grass yourself because you're the IRA owner. You have to hire someone to do that stuff. what we've seen done, real estate investors are smart people, sometimes too smart for their own good. What we've seen them, what they do is, okay, I've got this property. My friend has this property. He's going to pay me to mow his grass, and I'm going to pay him to mow my grass. Problem solved. Technically, it doesn't violate the rules, but so those kind of things you just have to be careful with in it. I've been doing that I've been doing it for about 4.5 years now. I just kind of stumbled on. I had some clients that came to me and said they wanted to do this, and I had to educate myself on it. And I read what I could on it, studied up on it to the point where the administrator that's in town, if they give out advice about an investment or something like that, then they're in a fiduciary relationship. So they don't want to do that. So they say, why don't you call O'Brien and talk to him? So then I get a lot of these people asking me, can they do this, can they do that? And then I just, look as a client, see. So I had to kind of educate myself on these various nuances. And I don't know. Occasionally I get stumped on one. I got to go back to the books and take a look at it. But it's an interesting area of real estate. I don't know how long it's going to last. I mean, obviously, if the credit markets start loosening up, if banks suddenly decide that they're going to start doing warehouse lines for investors and things like that again, then the IRA probably becomes, a second or third option for funding. If the market starts to tick up, then private investors may look at that as a better investment than maybe some other kind of intervention. I have one client that is doing some stuff out in North Dakota, some apartment buildings and things. You all know about the Bakken oil field out there. There's a lot of folks out there that are, I don't know if you've seen any stories about the housing situation for these temporary workers that are working in the oil out there. Sums of money that they're paying to rent out, pull their mobile home into the Walmart parking lot is insane. Or they're at a KOA campground or whatever. So there's a lot of real estate investors that are going out and buying land in North Dakota in the Bakken region, and they're going out and they're building apartment buildings so that they're maybe just a little bit more or about the same price. These people have running water, they've got indoor plumbing, they got a place they can cook, all that kind of stuff. Just a little bit more convenient than setting up in a campground or a parking lot or something like that. So there's an area of real estate right now where private investors are interested because of how quickly the land is escalating, how the projected cash flow that people are going to be able to get from these apartment buildings. So I just did a $1.1 million raise earlier this year with one of our clients, and it's amazing how fast they're proceeding. He's already got 2 more parcels of land already bought. He said, I have to keep going because the land is just escalating in value that quickly. And so they're picking up a lot of land out there to just keep going on doing it. So there's an area where private investors may be interested as well. But it's still the tricky part in all this stuff. The deals are out there, the properties are out there. The tricky thing out there is finding the money to do the deals. And it's slowly but surely starting to, I can tell it's starting to come back. So in terms of advice, one thing is that, is there anybody here that, are you always going to stick with real estate, or is there anybody that's thinking about like law school, business, anything? What kind of stuff are you just going to, what are you guys thinking about doing after graduation?
I think the majority of us are going to enter the real estate industry.
Okay.
One way or another.
Okay.
We're all real estate people.
Well, one thing, I am friends with a lot of folks, obviously, in the real estate industry. And one piece of advice I give you, and applies to you guys just as much as it applies to what I do with my legal practice, is keep up on the technology stuff, especially the online stuff, the social media, the different apps and things like that, because you can really set yourself out and establish your brand through the use of those tools. I built my practice via networking. I would go and just go to every event possible and meet people and get cards and sit down with them for coffee and follow up with them. And I built this referral network, and I actually have, I kept them home, I have a pair of shoes just like these, and I actually have a hole that I wore out the bottom. It was the first, I've been practicing since 2000, and I came over to my last firm as kind of the grinder, right? I was the one that was working on everybody else's files. And at some point, I just decided I wanted to build my own practice, I wanted to build my own client base. And in that year's time, when I decided to do that, I actually wore out a pair of shoes that might have a hole in the sole of them, so I keep them as a reminder. You know, don't ever get lazy, because you work pretty hard to get there. So I got to build this little contact thing, but the problem is, you know, we all have, you know, day jobs. You guys are going to be out selling property. I got my commodity is my time. So sitting down and meeting with everybody for coffee every single day, you know, 8 hours a day doesn't work. So I got into the sort of thing. I got LinkedIn, then it was Facebook, and then Twitter, and I just keep in contact with people. You know, I use it as a networking tool. You know, meet other people in real estate, give it, you know, be out there and be a resource to people, and it's amazing the return you get on that kind of stuff. I started doing a blog a few years ago, and I get business out of it. My firm sponsored. Anybody ever listen to WCCO radio, the Real Estate Radio Hour on Saturday mornings? Everybody heard the Legal Minute? No, that's me. They're clients of mine. It was clients of mine that started that show 4 years ago. I just keep representing whoever becomes the host. And we started doing a kind of like a PSA on different real estate issues. And I would just go in and I pre-record them, and they put some funky music behind them, and then they put them on Saturdays during the show, and then they give us little audio file stuff, so, you know, we archive them on our website and things like that. But it's amazing how many people, I didn't think anybody listened anymore, but it's amazing that how many people actually, I heard it on the radio on Saturday. Kind of fun. I understand, I think the show is, I have it on good authority, the show is apparently going to be expanding to 2 hours rather than 1, because apparently, it sounds like the law firm that does the show afterward, they're not renewing it, they've been joking, so apparently they couldn't hold the audience until St. Thomas football started, so the real estate show gets to be 2 hours now. But you know, it is kind of fun and pride to be on the same station as the town. But you know, so you just got to keep. You have to work hard at it. You got to do a lot of marketing. If you're going to do whatever profession you're going to go into, you're always going to be in sales, and you know, your practice is going to be no different than mine. You have to keep a steady stream of clients in order to keep making money, keep doing deals, and so it's keeping in touch with people. It's getting your name out there. And it's, you know, I think you have to work harder these days to be in the same position financially and professionally than maybe 10, 15 years ago. And part of it is you know, is the technology and things like that. It's made things close faster, things move quicker. There's a lot of people that want to do things themselves. That's what I experience in my profession. Is, well, why can't I go to LegalZoom and just set up an LLC? You know, so you know, that's the kind of stuff that I have. And I have to provide some other value other than just here's your documents and here's your bill. Enjoy your investment company. You know, I have to do more than that. So, see if I think that was everything. Yeah, I think that's everything I prepared. Are there any questions? You know, we're kind of a small group, and I always want to take questions.
No.
Yeah.
So getting back to your putting real estate in an IRA. So if you got an investor that already owns an apartment building, is there a way to transfer that or sell that into an IRA, or does it have to be a new property?
It's tough. It's tough. There are, believe it or not, there are ways that you can partner with your IRA personally on a new LLC. Okay, that situation might be a little bit harder. The situation I've seen before where it does work is you have a piece of raw land and you want to build something on the land, right? And you want to use IRA funds to do the construction. Well, if you got the thing in your personal name, you can make that as that's the asset you contribute personally to the LLC, and the IRA can contribute just the amount of funds needed for construction and things like that. And then you form the LLC. But the proviso in that is the IRA has to own the majority interest. You can't own, you personally couldn't own the majority interest in a situation like that. The apartment building that's already built and running, that might be a trickier one, but you know, it's just a matter, all these deals, it's a matter of just kind of peeling back and a little bit of Q&A and figuring out if there is a way to do it. It's theoretically possible.
So if you put a piece of land in that you contribute, and let's say it's a piece of land that you're going for money, and you're sitting on a big gain, what's your basis when you go in? Do you have to realize the gain before you put it in, or does it go in at the original basis, or what happens?
It's a good question for the CPA. For my purposes, I'm looking at the self-dealing aspect of things like that. I always tell what I always tell my clients is, I mean, in terms of the value that we're using for the property, I'm telling them to go and get an appraisal as of the time of the contribution, so that we can show, if the IRS ever came calling, that we can demonstrate that the property as of now is worth less than the IRA funds that they're contributing into the LLC. In terms of the tax treatment of that, that's a good question.
Can you use for a property that you're going to put into an IRA? Does it have to be a cash transaction, or can you use leverage?
Good question. Very good question. I forgot to touch on that. You can, if your IRA funds are involved, it has to be a non-recourse lending transaction. You can't have the IRA owner personally guarantee a loan to the LLC. The exception is that the IRA can be contributed, the funds can go into a new LLC. Okay, so you have a brand new LLC that you set up, and you go into the bank and you want to get a loan to do a construction loan or what have you. And most traditional banks these days, it's not going to work because they're going to ask for the personal guarantee and not just go on the property itself as collateral. But there are resources out there, private lenders, other IRA owners that aren't looking to buy real estate. Their thing is they're basically hard money lenders. They want to maybe do a 6-month, 12-month construction loan and get 14 or 15% interest. So they'll do the loan. If someone out there, I do a lot of work with investors that are doing those lending transactions, where you have somebody that buys, let's say, a condo unit, and they find out that their IRA funds cover the acquisition, but they also need to do $30,000 worth of improvements in the property before they can sell it. While they can get the money, they can take a non-recourse loan through another investor, and they're going to pay a healthy interest rate on it, but they can still do it. So it has to be, they can do it, but it has to be non-recourse. It can't be, the IRA owner can't personally guarantee the debt. But they are quite prevalent. They're usually shorter-term construction loan type deals. There are some acquisition stuff too. It might even be like a temporary thing until they can get a bank to do something else, or they get some cash out of a property and pay it off. But yes, the non-recourse deals are happening. But going into U.S. Bank or Wells Fargo, they won't do a real estate loan without a personal guarantee system.
Can we do this through like a Roth IRA, so all your
the administrators do have different IRA products, different 401k products, just like any other financial advisory company. And yeah, I think people do have around construction.
Is there a minimum or maximum you can contribute?
There's not a minimum. There are rules after you get to, there's a certain maximum contributions every year based on income. I don't have the numbers on me, but yeah, there are some caps on it eventually. It's always good if you're going to do it. I always say, besides working with an attorney to set up your company and your IRA administrator, you should really have a CPA and a financial advisor on your team too, because the financial advisor that can figure out, you see, get the question, well, how much can I put at risk? Well, let's do a financial plan and figure out how much you want to, put into this and how much you want to keep in other investments. So, it isn't for everybody. It's usually someone that maybe is a little bit more sophisticated in the real estate area and just wants that is savvy enough to know what they can do. A lot of times they've already studied up on the IRS regulation before they even come to me, which is nice. They don't have to tell them they can't do what they want to do. But it's you know, it's an interesting funding vehicle. Yeah.
So would that be the same as a loan against your IRA?
No, yeah, this would be different. This would be different. This would be your IRA is investing in the LLC or the asset. It would be a little bit different because a loan you have, I believe, a 5-year time limit before you have to repay those loans. This is different. You can leave it in. You can leave it in longer than the required time to pay that loan.
Say after graduation, I'm going to brokerage or whatever, what would you say would be some of the benefits and drawbacks of taking my education further, getting my law degree, specializing in real estate as an attorney as yourself?
The legal market is really tight right now. Especially with 4 law schools in town. We're seeing a lot of young attorneys that are setting up their own firms, basically because they can't get in or they've been let go from one of the big firms. The real estate market is changing, or the legal market is changing nationwide, and really in Minnesota. You have a lot of international and national-based law firms that are setting up branch offices in different cities, okay? And I would say that our firm at 44 attorneys is starting to become, I would say, the smaller end of the downtown firms. I mean, the downtown real estate, the cost for the rent per square foot keeps going up, and it's pricing other firms out of being downtown. The firm that I left in February, they went through it. They were 20 attorneys, and the overhead cost to maintain Class A office space downtown, especially at the same time I was telling you about how technology is changing our practice and how much harder we have to work to keep the same numbers in terms of revenue. You're seeing more firms go out to the suburbs. You're seeing more people come right out of law school and start practicing, which it's nice that technology affords them that, but it's also not, from my perspective, it's not a good thing to be running. I had the benefit from day one of having mentors in legal practice. Wherever firm I went to, I had a mentor there and learned along the way. And I think that's a little bit of a negative right now, that there's a lot of young attorneys starting out that have no mentoring whatsoever, that are setting up their own firms. I think it's making it harder, especially when you get into litigation situations, trying to get things settled. Young attorneys just don't have the client control that some of a more experienced attorney does. So it is a tight market. In terms of having any advantage as a real estate practice, it's you can only do so much yourself, right? And then you got to go to your team, and you got to go to others, and whether or not it's worth your time to do that versus hiring someone like me to help on a particular deal, that's a decision. But no, the legal market right now is really, really big. Honestly, I thought when St. Thomas opened its law school, I thought that one of the other schools would close. Either the one I targeted, I thought Hamlin would close, and Mitchell would suffer and decline a little bit. And for a while, it just seemed that they were all clicking along, and people just wanted to do it. If anybody's wanting to go into the legal profession because they think it's a rich and glamorous lifestyle, come talk to me. I'll put that misconception to rest. Because my wife will put that misconception to rest. Because I can leave the house at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I usually come home at 8 o'clock at night. And I probably got about 3 different marketing things during the day, and I'm trying to bill, and just keep going. So I think it's actually forcing me to take a week of vacation next week, because I haven't taken one in about 10 years. Just because I keep going. So it's not an easy lifestyle, believe it or not, but it's fun. When you get to represent, one of the other niches that I have besides the breweries is I do a little bit of sports law, and represent a couple of ex-Vikings. So it's always fun when you hang around, turn football and beer into business opportunity, and it's kind of fun to do. So yeah.
What's been your favorite transactions you've been involved in?
Favorite transaction? Oh, God.
One that was most exciting or?
God, there's just so many. I'm trying to think of it. Well, usually the ones that you remember, you don't like because they're just hellish. I can remember, one of the ones I remember from my very first firm was my first year practicing. And there was a situation, it was a land registration matter. And it was some of the legal description, it was supposed to be like a triangle and there was a call missing. And it should have closed the triangle and because it didn't have, either you closed the triangle or it just was ambiguous, right? And so I had to go and help get this thing registered, and and of course these properties had been cut up and sent, mortgaged and all this stuff. And I spent I don't know how many months chasing, holders of second, and third mortgages so they could consent to the registration, so I could actually go have the hearing and get it registered. Minnesota has this Torrens system of real estate, it's an alternative registration from the abstract, mostly used in Hennepin County and Ramsey County, a little bit up in the Duluth area. And the idea behind it is it's based on a 18th century or 19th century system for registering ship titles in Australia. So that's where it came from, Sir Richard Torrens. That's where they get the name of the Torrens system, right? The idea was that you have the certificate of title, and if the interest in the property was not on the certificate of title, then it didn't exist, right? There was no, you hear this concept of bona fide purchaser, right? Someone that bought a property, has some interest in the property, and didn't have notice of something that was not recorded, right? In the abstract system, there's a way that, they allow this bona fide purchaser exception, right? Well, Torrens, for a long time, didn't have that. It's like, if it isn't on the certificate, it's not there, okay? Well, case went before the court a couple of years ago, and the court, in its eminent wisdom, the Minnesota Supreme Court established a bona fide purchaser exception in the Torrens system. And most of us at the time said, why the hell do we need the Torrens system anymore? It's just another recording system. So a couple of years ago, I did a blog post. I did the most useless real estate laws ever. And the Torrens law was number one. And I said, geez, in this era of all these tight budgets at the county level, we could just, can the Torrens department and look how much money we'd save. Well, a couple weeks later, I had to do a proceeding subsequent, and the deputy examiner was kind of snippy with me. I'm like, read my blog, don't you? I called your job worthless. But I think that, so that it was a Torrens case that I had a registration proceeding that I had started, but it's the bar will never advocate getting rid of it because it's an attorney make-work program, anytime, especially with these foreclosures. If it's a foreclosure in Torrens, they have to pay me $3,000 to go over and get a new certificate drawn up through a proceeding subsequent to initial registration. So, the fees are too good, so we'll never actually stand up on principle and say get rid of it, but I think it's worthless. I think it's absolutely worthless. So, went off on a tangent there, but yes, I remember seeing the Torrens thing and I have like nightmares when I get out there. One of my former ones goes my first big deal.
You've been a part of any large development projects?
Just some condo stuff. Back in the day, some office condos and things like that. A few residential condos. So, I had a partner of mine that did a lot of development stuff, and unfortunately, none of those guys lost everything. So they're in that real estate investor category now, trying to bring themselves back up. So, other questions?
What would you say is I guess just the idea of what attorneys do all day, do sitting at your desk doing the contracts and stuff? How much time do you say you spend marketing for clients as opposed to meeting with clients as opposed to actually sitting down and doing stuff?
It all depends on the day. I spend a lot of my time on the phone. I probably do a couple hours a day of marketing, whether it be, hard marketing, going to an event or something, or doing something, a blog post, or writing an article, or doing things like that. You know, I'll tell you, I'll give you an example. My afternoon entails, we just picked up a file from another law firm, and allegedly the legal description of the survey don't jive, so I got a stack of paper about this thick that I got to spend an hour or so reviewing and getting up to speed on. And then I got a few contracts to draft. This morning I was dealing, our firm does a lot of legal malpractice defense. So occasionally we'll get something, and if it's a real estate matter, they have me look at it and figure out how, if it can be fixed, and if not, what do they do, and that kind of stuff, and advice. Whoever the attorney is that notified the insurer that what that person needs to do. So that was a little bit of my morning. You're taping my real estate radio minutes this morning. That was the first of the month I go do that. So, you know, there's I don't know if there's ever a pattern for how many days ago. You know, it was one of the Vikings that I represent is Tommy Kramer, the quarterback. I don't know if you guys remember him, but he's in town a couple weeks ago. He's like, let's go play golf. Tommy, you got a closing tomorrow. I got a 4-inch stack of documents. I can't just drop everything and play golf. Why not? Can't. You know, it's like I gotta review this stuff. So, but yeah, it is a lot of documenting. You know, parsing legal descriptions. It's fun. I mean, I'm probably sick that. Yeah.
Do you make more money now or before? Working for someone else or in your own?
Well, I've always worked for somebody else. I mean, I've been working at a firm since the beginning of my practice, and I probably always will. You know, the trade-off if you work for yourself, you might make a little bit more, you might have to work a few less hours, but to me it would be an absolute pain in the butt to have to send out your own bills and fix your computer issues and do all this kind of stuff, or do payroll of your employees and stuff. And so you know, the trade-off is I might make a little bit less by sticking with the firm, but I get the convenience of being able to do nothing but practicing and marketing. In terms of how much more, yeah, I make more than I did 12 years ago. I can say that now. Usually, if I'm making a move from a law firm, if anybody gets to know me, you know that it probably has something to do with I had a chance to get a little bit more compensation. And it wasn't feeling I wasn't compensated adequately at the last place. But it is, you know, you don't hear about attorneys having billable hour requirements, and in order to maintain that same level of hours that you could do easily 10, 12 years ago, you do have to put more time in, because you can't, I mean, it's the era of computers, it's the era of technology, it's the era of canned documents. You can't charge a client $5,000 for an LLC. You know, you just can't, because they go to legals who can get it for, you know, $1,000 or whatever. You gotta be a little bit, you gotta kind of meet in the middle. So for that, you know, revenue-wise, in order to keep the revenue up and everything like that, you have to be able to hustle along. That's, I think one thing I've done well is I try to get my name out there a lot. If you Google my name, a lot of stuff comes up, and that's by design. So, and I get people that call me and they say, well, so-and-so referred me, or I saw your website, or saw your blog post, or heard you on the radio, and that's all intentional. And, you know, I try to be, I've had people tell me you're everywhere. I think that's the goal. You know, if you could just kind of, you know, be out there and you know, and in my profession too, there's this reputation that we're, you know, these elitist ivory tower snobs, and if you get down and get to know people and hang out and stay connected with people, then you kind of break down those stereotypes and you break down those barriers. I got introduced to a thing on Monday night as an attorney that you want to hang around with. I'm like, wow, that's kind of cool. That was better than the last one. Someone else said, he doesn't act like an attorney. I guess that's a compliment. Any others? Okay, well, I've got cards up here. Please take one. If you ever have any questions, if you ever need assistance or anything, you know, because I'm an alum and I do help out fellow Tommies. Our website's on there. The one site that's not on there, actually, I'll write it down for you, is my, I have a personal website. I do a lot, like I said, I do a lot of writing, speaking, these radio bits and everything, and I keep them all, and we archive them all on this separate website with the blog and everything like that. So I would say there's thousands of dollars of free legal advice on this website. You just got to go to it. So I'll put it up here. It's Jeffrey O'Brien, ESQ.com. You can pretty much find anything that I've got on there. I've got some stuff, some articles that I've done on brewery law issues. I've got the real estate stuff on there. I've got some sports law stuff. Try to kind of, everything that I cover, I usually put on that site. There's a few videos. There is actually a YouTube video that's linked there, a little bit longer discussion on the IRA stuff where we had, actually in Jacob's office, we had myself and we had Todd Will, who's with Nexus Direct IRAs, third-party administrator for these IRA accounts, as well as Josh Manier, who's an IRA lending specialist. He was talking about these recourse loans. If you want to learn more about that topic in particular, I would encourage you to go look at that video. I think there's one up there in my business law 101, and there's one clip of me out at the state fair doing the real estate show this last year. We kind of amped it up. So if you want to take a look, we talked about estate planning by deed. Did a little bit of estate planning too. So take a look at that site. I say grab a card. You want to keep in touch. That's about it.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.